Growing up with a younger sister in Portland, I learned early what it meant to be a protector. Diane was more than family to me. She was the person I would have done anything for, the one I trusted without question. We were inseparable as kids, 2 years apart, but closer than most twins. I never imagined that 20 years later, the person I loved most would be the one who destroyed everything I had built. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning in March 2015, and by the time the truth came out, I had already lost a decade of my life. Before I continue with what happened, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you have siblings, tell me honestly, would you take the fall for them if they asked you to hit that like button? If this story already has you hooked, and make sure you subscribe, because what comes next is going to get a lot darker before it gets better. Trust me, you will want to see how this ends. My father George worked as a mechanic, hands always stained with grease back, always aching from hours bent over engines. My mother Linda was a nurse at the community hospital, coming home exhausted after double shifts but still finding energy to make us dinner. They taught us one rule above all others. Family comes first always. No exceptions, no excuses. When you are part of a family, you protect each other no matter what. Diane was everything I was not. Where I was practical and steady, she was spontaneous and bright. She had this way of lighting up a room, drawing people to her without even trying. But she also had a knack for finding trouble, and I was always the one pulling her out of it. When she was 16, and some kids at school were bullying her, calling her names, and pushing her around in the hallways, I was 18 and did not hesitate. I found those kids after school and made it clear they needed to leave my sister alone. Got suspended for 3 days, but it was worth it to see Diane safe again. By the time I was 25, I had built a decent life for myself. I worked as an assistant manager at a large electronics store, pulling in enough to afford a nice apartment and put some money aside each month. Nothing fancy, but it was honest work, and I was proud of it. Diane was 23 then, working at a salon downtown, cutting hair and doing nails. She had just started dating this guy named Kyle, someone I had only met once or twice. Something about him rubbed me the wrong way, but I kept quiet. Diane seemed happy, and that was what mattered. Then came that Tuesday morning, March 10th, 2015. I was getting ready for work, pouring coffee in my kitchen, when my phone rang. Diane's name lit up the screen. The moment I answered, I knew something was terribly wrong. Her voice was shaking, broken by sobs that made my chest tighten. She could barely get the words out. Milton, I messed up. I messed up so bad, and I do not know what to do. Please, you have to help me. I told her to slow down, to breathe, to tell me what happened. Between the crying, the story came out in pieces. She had borrowed money from a man named Marcus, someone who operated as a loan shark in our neighborhood. $15,000. She said she needed it for bills for rent, for things she could not afford. But Marcus was not the kind of person who gave extensions or accepted excuses. He wanted his money back, and he had started threatening her. She said he told her he would hurt her if she did not pay up soon. I could hear the terror in her voice, real and raw. I did not have $15,000. I had maybe $3,000 in savings money I had been setting aside for emergencies. But this was Diane. This was my little sister. The same girl I had protected from bullies, the same person I had sworn to always look out for. I told her we would figure something out, that I would help her. She asked if we could meet that evening to talk about a plan. I agreed immediately. We met in a parking lot on the east side of town, one of those empty lots behind a closed-down grocery store. Diane was there with Kyle, both of them looking nervous and fidgety. Kyle did most of the talking. He said he knew Marcus kept a lot of cash in his office money from all the people he loaned to. The office was in a rundown building, and Marcus was careless about security. Kyle said there was a back door that Marcus often left unlocked, and that Marcus himself left the office every Thursday evening to go collect payments from people around the city. If someone went in during that window, they could grab the money Diane owed and get out before Marcus even knew what happened. I should have walked away right then. Every instinct in my body was screaming that this was wrong, that this was dangerous, that this would end badly. But I looked at Diane, saw the fear in her eyes, heard her voice crack when she said, "Please, Milton, this is the only way." Kyle kept reassuring me it would be simple in and out, no one would get hurt. He made it sound so easy, so foolproof. And like an idiot, I believed him. I believed them both. Thursday night, March 12th, I drove them to the neighborhood where Marcus's office was located. The plan was for Kyle to go inside while Diane and I waited nearby. But at the last minute, Diane said she was too scared to be in the car alone, so she went with Kyle. I parked 2 blocks away, engine running, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. 20 minutes passed. Then I heard sirens loud and close, cutting through the quiet night. My phone buzzed with a text from Kyle. Just 2 words, "Run." It went wrong. I panicked. I drove home as fast as I could without breaking traffic laws, hands shaking on the steering wheel, mind racing with worst-case scenarios. I barely slept that night, jumping at every sound, convinced the police would show up at any moment. And they did. Just not when I expected. The next morning, there was a heavy knock on my door. I opened it to find 2 detectives standing there, badges out, faces stern. Detective Morrison and his partner. They asked if I was Milton, and when I nodded, they told me I was under arrest for burglary and attempted robbery. They read me my rights while snapping handcuffs around my wrists, cold metal biting into my skin. My neighbors watched from their doorways as I was led out to the police car. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. At the police station, they sat me down in an interrogation room and laid out everything. Kyle had been caught inside Marcus's office. There had been a fight. Marcus came back earlier than expected and confronted Kyle, and things got physical. Marcus ended up with a black eye and some bruises, nothing life-threatening, but enough to make the charges serious. Kyle had been arrested on the spot, but here is where everything fell apart. Kyle told the detectives that the whole thing was my idea. He said I was the mastermind, that I needed money to pay off gambling debts, and that I had forced him and Diane to help me. And Diane, my own sister, backed up his story. She told the police that I had pressured her, threatened her, made her participate against her will. She said I was desperate and dangerous, that she was terrified of what I might do if she did not go along with the plan. I could not breathe. I could not think. This was Diane, the person I had protected my entire life, the person I had just tried to help, and she was sitting in another room telling lies that would destroy me. When I asked to see her to talk to her, the detective said she refused. All I got was a text message later that day. "I'm sorry, but I have to protect myself. They held me on $50,000 bail, an amount my family could never afford. So I sat in county jail for 3 months, waiting for my case to go to trial. The public defender assigned to me was a woman named Sarah Nguyen. She was kind, competent, but she did not have much to work with. The evidence against me was overwhelming. Kyle and Diane both gave consistent statements saying I was the ringleader. Marcus confirmed he had seen me around his building before, something Diane must have set up to make me look guilty. There was even surveillance footage from a convenience store nearby showing my car in the area that night. My parents visited me every week. My mother cried every single time. My father looked like he had aged 10 years overnight. They wanted to believe me, I could see that, but the evidence was so damaging. I wrote letters to Diane every day begging her to tell the truth, promising I would not be angry, just pleading with her to do the right thing. She never wrote back, not once. Sarah came to see me in jail 3 months after my arrest. She had news, and I could tell from her face it was not good news. The district attorney's office had made an offer. If I pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of attempted burglary, They would recommend 5 years of probation instead of taking the case to trial. If we went to trial and lost, I was looking at 20 years in prison. 20 years. Sarah laid it out for me as gently as she could. With the witnesses against me, with the physical evidence, with my own sister testifying that I had masterminded the whole thing, a jury would almost certainly convict me. She had seen cases like this before. The prosecution had built a solid case, and we had nothing to counter it with except my word against theirs. 2 against 1. The odds were not in my favor. I did not sleep for days. I laid on that thin jail mattress, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out what to do. If I went to trial and lost, I would be locked up until I was 45 years old. My parents would be elderly by then, possibly gone. My entire life would disappear behind bars for something I did not do. But if I took the plea deal, I would be admitting to a crime I did not commit. I would have a felony on my record forever. I would lose my job, my reputation, my future. I thought about my parents, about how much they had already suffered watching me sit in jail. My father had stopped eating properly. My mother had started taking sleeping pills just to get through the nights. They were good people who had worked hard their whole lives, and they did not deserve to watch their son go to prison for 20 years. I thought about Diane, about how she had looked at me in that parking lot when she asked for help, about how easily she had thrown me away when it was convenient for her. In the end, I made the choice I thought I had to make. I took the plea deal. On a cold morning in June 2015, I stood in a courtroom in front of a judge and said words I never thought I would say. I plead guilty to attempted burglary. My voice shook. My hands were clenched so tight my nails cut into my palms. The judge sentenced me to 5 years of probation, and just like that, I became a convicted felon. Walking out of that courtroom as a free man should have felt like a victory, but it felt like defeat. I had just admitted to something I did not do. I had let the system beat me because I was too afraid to fight and lose everything. My mother hugged me outside the courthouse, crying into my shoulder, and all I could think was that I had failed myself, failed the truth, failed everything. Probation meant I had rules to follow. I could not leave the state of Oregon without permission. I had to meet with my probation officer every single week. I could not drink alcohol. I could not break any laws, no matter how minor. One mistake, one violation, and I would go to prison for the full 20 years. It was freedom, but it was freedom with chains. The worst part was trying to rebuild my life with a felony conviction hanging over me. My job at the electronics store was gone. They fired me the day I was arrested, and I could not blame them. I applied to dozens of places over the next few months. Restaurants, retail stores, warehouses, anything that would hire someone with a criminal record. Most places did not even call me back. The ones that did took one look at my background check and said they would pass. I finally found work washing dishes at a small diner on the outskirts of Portland. Minimum wage, no benefits, no respect. I scrubbed pots and pans for 8 hours a day, went home to a tiny studio apartment that smelled like mold, and tried to convince myself this was temporary, that things would get better. But they did not. Not for a long time. My parents tried to be supportive, but I could see the disappointment in their eyes. They never said it out loud, but I knew they wondered if maybe I really had done it. Maybe I really had planned the robbery. How could they not wonder? Their own daughter had said so. Diane had moved to Seattle right after the trial. I heard through my mother that she had met someone new, a man named Robert. She was building a new life far away from the mess she had created. I lived those 5 years in a fog. Wake up, go to work, come home, sleep, repeat. The probation officer checked in on me, made sure I was following the rules, treated me like a criminal because that is what I was on paper. I had no friends, no social life, no future to look forward to. Just the slow, grinding passage of time waiting for my sentence to be over. In the 4th year of my probation, my father had a massive heart attack at work. He died before the ambulance even arrived. 6 months later, my mother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. She fought it for 3 months before passing away in a hospice bed, holding my hand and telling me she loved me. The funeral was small, just a handful of relatives, some neighbors, and Diane. She showed up with Robert, her new husband. I had not seen her in almost 4 years. She looked different, older, more polished, like she had left behind the girl I used to know. She stood at the back of the church during the service, avoiding eye contact with me the entire time. When people came up to offer condolences afterward, she approached me briefly. "I am sorry for your loss," she said. Her voice was flat, distant, like she was talking to a stranger. I stared at her, this person who used to be my whole world, who I had sacrificed everything for, and I felt nothing. No anger, no love, just emptiness. I nodded and walked away. Robert glanced at me apologetically, but he did not say anything. After the funeral, I made a decision. Diane was not my sister anymore. She was just someone I used to know, someone who had made a choice that destroyed my life. I finished my probation a few months later and moved away from Portland. I needed to start over somewhere. No one knew my name, no one knew my past. I ended up in a small town in Idaho, got a job at an auto repair shop, and slowly, painfully began to rebuild. 10 years is a long time to carry a weight like that. By 2025, I had made peace with my past as much as anyone could. I had a decent job working at the repair shop, fixing engines and transmissions, doing honest work with my hands. I had met a woman named Amy, someone kind and patient, who did not ask too many questions about where I came from. We had been dating for about a year, taking things slow, building something real. I rarely thought about Diane anymore. She was a ghost from another life, someone who existed in memories I tried not to revisit. I assumed she was still in Seattle, still living whatever life she had built with Robert. I never reached out, and she never reached out to me. That chapter was closed, or so I thought. Then on a Saturday morning in early September, my phone rang with a number I did not recognize. I almost did not answer, but something made me pick up. The voice on the other end was male, uncertain, nervous. "Is this Milton?" the voice asked. I confirmed it was, and the man introduced himself as Robert, Diane's husband. My stomach dropped. I had not heard that name in years, had not thought about either of them in months. Robert said he needed to talk to me about something important, something about Diane.